Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening. Today we'll be investigating Case 1 of the Gateless Gate, Zhaozhou's dog. A monk asked Zhaozhou, "Does even a dog have Buddha nature?" Zhaozhou replied, "No." Mu. Wu Men says, "If you sincerely wish to practice Zen, you must pass through the barrier of the ancestors. If you wish to attain genuine insight, you must abandon the path of conceptual understanding. If you do not pass through this barrier, and do not abandon the path of conceptual understanding, then your life will be that of a ghost, and you will be distracted and attached to whatever objects you stumble across. Tell me, what is the barrier of the ancestors? It is nothing other than this single word, no. It is the front gate to the realization of the origin. And so it is called the no-barrier gate of Zen, or the gateless gate of Zen. If you are able to pass through this barrier, not only will you meet Zhaozhou face to face, but you will also join hands and walk with the successive ancestors throughout time, entangling your eyebrows with theirs, seeing with the same eyes and hearing with the same ears. Doesn't it sound wonderful? Isn't there anyone that wants to pass through this barrier? Arouse your entire body with its 360 bones and joints and its 84,000 pores of the skin. Give rise to a spirit of doubt and investigate this word, no. Keep it close to you always, both day and night. Refrain from creating concepts of vacancy or attaching to relative ideas of having or not having. It will feel like you have just swallowed a red-hot iron ball, one that you cannot spit out even if you try. All of the illusory ideas and delusive beliefs that you have accumulated and carried with you into the present moment will be extinguished, and with natural ease the spontaneous unification of inside and outside will be realized. It will be realized, but you will be unable to express it, like a person who is unable to speak after waking from a wonderful dream. All of a sudden, an explosive transformation takes place, and you will astonish the heavens and shake the earth. Taking up the warrior's flaming sword, no opponent is your equal. When you meet the Buddha, you kill the Buddha. When you meet the successive ancestors, you kill the successive ancestors. On the precipice of life and death, you are completely at ease. Regardless of where you find yourself or how you arrive, you enjoy a merry and playful existence. I ask you again, how do you manifest this realization? Employ every ounce of your energy to embrace this no. If you hold on without interruption, behold, a single spark and the ancestral candle is lit. Wu Men's verse says, a dog, Buddha nature, the pronouncement perfect and final. Before you say it has or has not, you are dead where you stand. So today I'm going to take, this session, I'm going to take a page from the tradition or the form of Choboji, which is to begin a session with the first case of the gateless barrier, Zhaozhou's dog. Zhaozhou is Chinese for Zhaozhou. No, Zhaozhou is Japanese for Zhaozhou. So often when we hear this case, particularly in a tradition that comes from Japan, we hear this as Joshu's dog or Joshu's mu. But I quite like the translation that's been compiled here because it acknowledges that these ancestors of the Japanese tradition weren't Japanese, they were Chinese. And just like our ancestors weren't Steves and Freds, they were Japanese ancestors. And when we chant our ancestral lineage, we have this wonderful sound journey that we get to go on where we hear the names of the ancestors chanted first in Sanskrit, and then in Chinese, and then in Japanese, which gives us all an opportunity to butcher people's names in multiple languages. I wanted to start with Zhaozhou's dog. First of all, again, I just want to thank everybody for coming to engage in this week of practice. It's really great to get things underway here with an experienced group of practitioners. One of the things that I have to observe is that having this place of practice here in Suk and using it for practice regularly, I just notice how quickly things just start. People are used to practicing here. More and more people know where things are. They know what has to happen. And so there's a real... there's a lack of sort of futzing about with things and trying to figure out what's what. And it makes it very easy to sink right into practice. Today, I don't feel like it's the first day of sesshin. I feel like we've already been here for a couple of days. And it's been very easy to sink right into practice. I don't know if that's the same for everybody. Everybody sort of has their own session experience, but for me, I'm always amazed at how smoothly and how easily people settle into their role and to practice. And so I'm very grateful because it just gives me and it gives everybody here an opportunity to really sink in as fully and as deeply and as quickly as is possible. It's wonderful to have this place. I wanted to start with Zhaozhou's dog because, this is the tradition at Choboji, and I think it's such a fantastic tradition and a fantastic reminder I remember when I was training with Sasaki Roshi and engaging in koans, especially as a younger person, it's very easy to get caught up in the climbing attitude, or the progression attitude, or the sort of rank attitude. When we're engaged in koans, we can sort of start counting the number. We can start priding ourselves on, how many and how quickly we're going through koans. And I just remember that with Sasaki Roshi, one of the things that happened frequently enough to help me to really realize what koan practice was all about was that when I was feeling particularly good about my practice, or particularly good about my Sanzen practice, how I was doing with koans, just about the time where I would start feeling like I was getting somewhere, I'd pass a koan or do a demonstration, and the Roshi would seem very happy, and then he would return me to Zhaozhou's mu. We would come back to this very basic and fundamental koan: emptiness, mu. And the value or the lesson of this for me is that particularly as we develop in our practice, we more and more investigate and embody, deconstruct, explore subtle nuance of manifestation. And there are innumerable formations, there are innumerable combinations in manifestation. There's innumerable and endless subtlety in the nuances of relationship, making relationship with other human beings, making relationship with objects in the environment, making relationship with groups of people and with families and all kinds of things. But over and over again, there is just only this single activity of mu. And if we're going to practice Zen, all of our manifestation, all of our relationship making, all of our activities in this world arise more and more, always arise really, but more and more we become aware that they are arising from this single origin, this vast emptiness, which is characterized in this case mu. So particularly at the beginning of sesshin, I think it's an excellent practice to go back and to remind ourselves of what it is that we're doing. Particularly when we have a dominant sort of manifestation practice, which is to say that we have a very, in our center, we don't have a very strong, just frequent sesshin practice here. Presently, we have just one sesshin a year available on Vancouver Island. The Zen school, the word Zen comes from Zazen, jhana, dissolution. The source of this practice, if we're going to talk about the Zen school, another sort of way we could talk about it is the Zazen sect of Buddhism. This practice of seated meditation, intensive seated meditation, is the core, is the engine, is the reactor of the Zen school. So it's very important as practitioners that we remember this. It's very easy as a community and as a center to be distracted by all kinds of things, all kinds of motivations and all kinds of goals and tasks and directions to go in as a community and as an organization. But as a temple, as a practice place in the Zen school, I think it's important for us to remember that our reactor and our heart lies within the practice of intensive zazen, what we're all doing here this week. The reason that I think it's so important to emphasize this is that for the most part, when we're not practicing intensively, our practice tends to, and it necessarily requires us to sort of skim along the surface. It's very difficult to function in relationship. It's difficult to maintain a job. It's difficult to even maintain a conversation, frankly, order a coffee, anything in this world when we're deeply immersed in a practice of dissolution, dissolving, allowing ourselves to melt away, to drop away for the purpose or for the opportunity to realize that we are one with all things in this cosmos. When we're engaged in that kind of activity intensively, it's not always easy to function in a relative way. And I get that. But also, if we don't take up the practice of deeply, deeply dissolving, then all of this stuff, all of the teachings of Zen and all of the practices and teachings of Buddhism, they remain in this layer of consciousness, this conceptual framework that we have. We can say we think they're great ideas and we can understand them. And we can talk about interconnectedness, and we can talk about oneness, and we can talk about how all things in the universe are interrelated and affect each other. But my experience is that if we don't deeply engage in this process and practice of deep diving, deep dissolution, then it remains a conceptual structure. It remains just a thought or just an idea. And what I've found is that when we hold Buddhism, when we hold the teachings of Zen and Zen practice in this space, generally we can function through the framework of those ideas. We can function and operate our lives through this sort of conceptual framework we've created for ourselves, provided that things are fairly stable and fairly unthreatening and fairly benign. But what happens is that if we haven't done that deep practice, if we haven't begun to dive deeply, then when things get challenging and when things get difficult or painful, upsetting, stressful. The conceptual frameworks that we've built, they're all essentially become equal. And when those difficulties and upsets and pain come into play, we have a tendency to discard them all. And we go with what has worked for us historically. We go with what is habitual. We go with what leads me personally to the greatest, quickest comfort, the greatest, quickest way out of this circumstance, whatever it is. Buddhism, Zen, awakening, oneness, interconnectedness, all of that stuff just goes out the window. The function of this practice, the function of this intensive practice, the function of investigating a case like Zhaozhou's dog, is that it offers us a doorway through the sort of rational mind. We need the rational mind. The rational mind is a great thing with which to read maps, to perceive guidance, to follow instruction. We need it. If we didn't have a rational mind, I don't think we'd be able to practice Zen. The rational mind is what gets our butts on the cushion, gets our bodies into a Zen center, gets our hearts involved in a community and in a practice. But once our rational mind has brought us that far, once we're sitting on the cushion, the practice is to let go of the rational, conceptual mind. And as one of my teachers said, let Zazen do Zazen. So Zhaozhou's dog, the case itself is very simple. Wu Men goes on and on about it because Zhaozhou is so brief. Zhaozhou is considered one of the greatest Zen masters who ever lived, and he's referred to as the silver tongue. This monk approaches him. He is, at this point, he is a mature teacher, Zhaozhou. It took him a long time. It said he didn't really start teaching until he was 80 or 100 years old. And a monk asks him what seems on the surface to be a very simple question. Does even a dog have Buddha nature? Suppose we have to talk about what Buddha nature is too. Buddha nature, or true nature, is a way of describing the capacity to awaken. The word Buddha means the one who is awake. When we talk about Siddhartha Gautama or Shakyamuni, Buddha, we are talking about an historic person who lived and who realized or manifested this complete capacity to awaken. It's the teaching of Buddhism that this capacity to awaken is not anything special. It's not something that the historical Buddha had that we don't have. It's not something that's present only in some people and not in others. In fact, the teaching is that the Buddha nature is what is manifest in all things. Trees and rocks and plants and animals and dogs and chickens and the sun, the wind, the rain, and you and me, and everything. So this teaching alone is one that I think is glossed over so frequently that I think it's worth talking about. Most of us, when we come into practice, are totally burdened with ideas of high and low, good and bad, right and wrong, purity and impurity. And we have these ideas about basically every single thing in the universe. Every single thing in the universe we have an opinion about, whether it's good or bad or right or wrong or dirty or clean. Each of us has our preferences. Each of us has our choices. And one of the things that we have the greatest number of opinions and choices about is ourselves. We think that maybe we think that we're wonderful in certain ways. And we think that we're more wonderful than other people, certain other people. Maybe we think that we're more wonderful than animals. We're certainly more wonderful than trees, and we're more wonderful than dirty dogs. But maybe we're not as wonderful as, I don't know, birds or something. Likewise, I think many of us also have the opinion that we're not so good. We've got lots of problems and lots of desires and lots of impurities. We're full of things that are bad and ugly, embarrassing and shameful. And this is how each of us sort of walks through the world, with this mixture of highs and lows, goods and bads, pure and impure, clean and dirty, good and evil. And particularly in our culture, that's something that's really deeply seated. I think it pre-exists even sort of religious guilt and original sin and all that kind of stuff. I think this self-perception and this differentiation and gradation of everything in the cosmos is just primordial. I think it's so lizard-brainy. But the basic standpoint of the Buddha Dharma is that all things in this vast cosmos arise together. They arise simultaneously from a single origin, which has as its capacity, which has at its origin and as its content everything in this vast cosmos. There is no separation. There is no differentiation. There's nowhere to go that's outside. There's nothing that can be held inside. When we are doing our ceremonies, the Jukai ceremony, we talk about the Dharmakaya. the Dharmakaya means world. And when we're talking about the Dharmakaya, this sort of primordial state, for lack of a better word, which has as its content everything in the vast cosmos. This is what we're talking about when we say Dharmakaya. We say there's no one to kill, no one to be killed, all that kind of stuff. There's no differentiation. Everything in this vast universe melted down together, dissolved down together into one primordial soup. But we can't call it soup, because soup requires there being somebody outside to look at it. And that hasn't happened. It's completely unified. It's completely seamless. It's without any differentiation. There are no names. There are no sounds. There are no smells. There aren't even noses to smell with. But in this Dharmakaya, in this state of completeness, there is nothing lacking, absolutely nothing lacking. So when we talk about mu, when we talk about emptiness in the context of Buddhism, what we're talking about is nothing other than this Dharmakaya, which has as its content all things before they were born. J. Garfield, who's a Buddhist, he's a Buddhist professor of Buddhism, and I was at a session where he did daily lectures, and one of the greatest pieces that he spoke about was this understanding of emptiness. And when we're talking about emptiness, we have this tendency to think of it as a nothing. But in the context of Buddhism, we're not talking about a nothing. And one of the ways that he used to help us really grasp this, or really sort of understand this, was he said, if we talk about a room and we say that it's an empty room, is there nothing there? Well, no, of course not. If we look into a room, we can say maybe there's cushions in the room. We can say there's flowers in the room. And even if we were to take out the flowers and the cushions, we could say there's air in the room. So generally, if we're talking about an empty room, we have to specify what it is that it is empty of. So in common language, if we're talking about an empty room, we're talking about a room that is empty of people. It's a specific thing. When we're talking about emptiness in the context of Buddhism or of Zen, and we're applying this term of emptiness to the vast cosmos, we have to understand what it is that we're talking about this cosmos being empty of. And in the context of Buddhism, it is empty of anything to call a self, or an I, or a separate consciousness that stands outside. So when we're talking about emptiness in Buddhism and in Zen, we have to understand that we're talking about this vast cosmos, pregnant with capacity, pregnant with potential, pregnant with the possibility of all things. This is our origin. This is our true home. So when we're talking about Buddha nature, it's like asking this state or this origin is our home, and it's the home of everything in this cosmos. All things that we see and all things that we experience, and every planet in the universe, they all arise from this single origin. And as such, our capacity, my capacity, your capacity, a stone's capacity, the physical body of each of these things arises and dissolves. It's born, it exists for a while, and it returns to this origin, this formless origin without differentiation, without self. And as such, our capacity, not just the capacity of this body or this mind or this heart or this being, but the inherent capacity for awakening, the inherent capacity to realize our origin in each thing, in each person, in each object, in each animal, in each everything, is not different. So when we talk about Buddha nature, the capacity to awaken, if we talk about our fundamental, use all kinds of great words, fundamental purity, if you like, our underlying goodness, all of those things that I talked about before, about ranking ourselves and finding ourselves clean or dirty or better and worse, this is all the property of a mind, of a conceptual mind, which is based on a brain, which is based on a body, which is based in a single manifestation. And when we go beyond this, when we allow the brain and the body and the mind, the heart, to dissolve away and return to the origin, all of those limitations and all of those perceptions and all of those judgments also drop away. And we realize that our capacity, our genuine capacity, is as limitless as this vast emptiness that we're talking about in Zen, that we're talking about in Buddhism. My capacity is not different than that of the vast cosmos. Your capacity is not different than that of the vast cosmos. A tree's capacity, a rock's capacity, a dried turd's capacity is not different. So that's where this case starts. This case is actually the second case. In the first case, with Zhaozhou and the monk comes to him and asks, "Does even a dog have Buddha nature?" To which Zhaozhou replies, "Yes." In the first case, where we find Zhaozhou replying yes, we have this first lesson. We have this person coming who is differentiating good and bad creatures, right and wrong creatures, high and low things, clean and dirty objects. Having not even seen their own nature, having not even glimpsed the depth of their own capacity, they're looking around at other things and trying to understand this. Does even a dog have the Buddha nature? Does even a stone have the Buddha nature? To which Zhaozhou replies, yes. The first step, I think, in Buddhism, or one of the first steps that we can find in practice, before we get on to talking about Zhaozhou's dog and mu, or know, is to investigate this Buddha nature for ourselves. What Zhaozhou is pointing to in this case, mu, is that each of us, as we practice, we rest. We rest our mind. We allow our minds to fixate on things. We allow our minds to solidify things into good and bad, right and wrong, clean and dirty. We do it with things that are outside of us. We do it with things that are inside of us. And each of those things that we allow our mind to catch on to attach to, each of those things that we classify and rank and prefer or avoid, all rest, all exist, all manifest in the world of the relative, of what Muman calls the conceptual understanding. So I'm just going to read the comments. Wu Men's comments says, if you sincerely wish to practice Zen, you must pass through the barrier of the ancestors. If you wish to attain genuine insight, you must abandon the path of conceptual understanding. If you do not pass through this barrier and do not abandon the path of conceptual understanding, then your life will be that of a ghost, and you will be distracted and attached to whatever objects you stumble across. Just so. This tendency that we have to fixate objects in differentiation, to rank them, to prefer them, to choose them, this all exists in the realm of conceptual understanding. And if we're in the realm of conceptual understanding, the one thing that we certainly are sure about, the one thing that we are certain about having, possessing, and existing is this I. If we're in the world of conceptual understanding, we are standing outside or separate from the thing that we're looking at. And if we want to understand what this barrier is, if we want to understand what the wall, the gate between the world of conceptual understanding and this deep experience of shunyata, emptiness, the emptiness that has as its content all things, we must understand that it is nothing other than this I, me. A monk asks Zhaozhou, does even a dog have the Buddha nature? Zhaozhou replies, no, mu. This monk is asking a question in differentiation. Zhaozhou responds not by giving him an answer that is in the realm of conceptual understanding, but pointing him directly, or her, directly to the source. Mu. It doesn't just mean no, it means without. Has not. And he's not just talking about the dog. Tell me, what is the barrier of the ancestors? It is nothing other than this single word, no, or mu. It is the front gate of the realization of the origin. So it is called the gateless barrier of Zen. This barrier is nothing other than our own self, our own fixation with self that holds us separate, apart from. This practice that we engage in throughout the week is a great experiment. It's a great opportunity in a wonderful laboratory that is intentionally set up for this experiment. Everything that we do this week, we can approach in two ways. We can approach it as an outsider doing something. We can approach it, I am chanting, I am eating, I am sitting, I am paying attention to my breath, I am doing yoga, I am working with this. That's one way of doing it. And actually, we will all do this week. One way or the other, we'll be engaged, at least for some time, in an activity as a doer. There is also a way in which we can dissolve into the activity by giving ourselves fully over to the activity, whether it's in sitting or in walking or in chanting or in working or in eating. We can have this experience of the subject and the object meeting and dissolving into one another. The person who is eating and the food that is being eaten become one. They literally become one. And we can be there for that. We can experience that. But you know what's funny is we can't. As we engage in this practice of dissolution, zazen, jhana, when we experience it, when we dissolve into the activity, we find that there is no subject, there is no object, there is only the manifestation of this activity. When the chanter and the chanting dissolve into one, there is only this sound. When the eater and what's being eaten dissolve into each other, dissolve into the origin, there's nothing standing outside it to talk about it. A moment later, when that separation or that distance is born, we become aware. We become aware of the experience that's just taken place, and we want to talk about it, or we want to describe it, or we want to share it or something like this. Wow, that was really neat. What I just saw, what I just tasted, what I just felt, what I just experienced. But already we're standing outside of what that experience was, that we were immersed in, that we were dissolved in. There was no space, no gap, no judgment. What we're engaged in this week is an all-out experience fest. We're engaged in a 7-day immersion in this activity of dissolution. The word sesshin means gathering the heart-mind. The way of understanding it, I think, is to simply dissolve, spending the whole week, all of the different ways that we manifest, that we shoot out from the origin in our lives, in all different directions. The activity of sesshin is just like taking all of these different shoots and allowing them to melt back down, return home, return to our origin. And it requires some effort, because as we do this more and more, as we allow those appendages to sort of melt back in, the energy that's there begins to swell, and it wants to shoot out again. And our practice in this session is just to keep melting, keep our attention in the dissolution activity. Arouse your entire body with its 360 bones and joints and its 84,000 pores of the skin. Give rise to a spirit of doubt and investigate this word, no. This is just pointing to, as we sit, as we practice, as we go through our lives, pay attention to where we're getting stuck. Pay attention to where we're resting. Pay attention to where we're saying, this is real, or that's this, or this is good, or I'm dirty, or all those kinds of things. And when we develop a sensitivity to that sort of calcification, or that kind of fixation, the practice is to say no, not in a I find that, at least I found for me, it used to be that I was like, no! But that no, that rejective kind of no, is not what we're going for here. In fact, if anything, it's quite the opposite. It's like anywhere that we grabbed, thinking it's solid, we need to say no, or mu, and let it go with the breath. Let it go. It's not solid. It's not real. It's not separate. It's not different. It's not better. It's not worse. It's not clean. Just let it go. Keep it close to you always, this mu, this no, both day and night. Refrain from creating concepts of vacancy, emptiness that has nothing, or attaching to relative ideas of having or not. Do you have the Buddha nature? Do you not have the Buddha nature? What else is there? It will feel like you've just swallowed a red-hot iron ball, one that you cannot spit out even if you try. All of the illusory ideas and delusive beliefs that you have accumulated and carried with you into the present moment will be extinguished. Nothing, this practice of mu, this practice of dissolution, this practice of deeply investigating the nature of every phenomena, of every thought, of every idea, nothing stands up to this. With natural ease, the spontaneous unification of inside and outside will be realized. At once, the things that we held dear, the things that we held on to as being absolutely what makes me, me, melt away, drop away. Inside and outside, subject and object become one. And this is a transformative experience. This is where all of the talk, all of the concepts, all of the sila, and all of the wonderful sort of platitudes of Buddhism drop away with this single realization that all things in this vast cosmos are fundamentally one. It drops away because it drops out of the realm of conceptual understanding, of idea, and there is a profound realization that things are just so. It doesn't matter if I want them to be so. It doesn't matter if I like them to be so. Often I don't. I don't always like knowing that everything in the cosmos and I are one. When I see the way that my fellow human beings treat this beautiful planet, treat each other, I don't want to be one with those people. I don't want to be one with this planet. I don't want to feel an intimate connection with all of that suffering. But there's no choice. It isn't another way. It will be realized, but you will be unable to express it like a person who is unable to speak after waking from a wonderful dream. All of a sudden, an explosive... I should say something about that. I'm not sure. It's so simple, that experience, and we can compare it to anything. A wonderful joke, a great cup of coffee, fantastic sex, anything you want. In the experience of that unification, of that meeting, of that dissolution between subject and object, there's a wonderful thing that happens, magical. And a moment later, as I was saying, we arise and we reflect and we describe and try to capture it. But it's foolish to try and have someone else have that experience through our description of it. There's a saying in Zen that you can't feed a person with pictures of rice cake. And it's just the same. It will be realized, all of a sudden an explosive transformation takes place and you will astonish the heavens and shake the earth. Taking up the warrior's flaming sword, no opponent is your equal. When you meet the Buddha, you kill the Buddha. When you meet the successive ancestors, you kill the successive ancestors. And this is just pointing to, we often think of ourselves little, and especially when we're engaged in a spiritual practice, it's very easy to think of ourselves as insignificant or insufficient or not quite there yet. And there's value in that, I think. There's always more to go. There's always greater realization. But this realization is that fundamentally, there's no difference. No difference in the capacity of Jesus Christ and myself. No difference in the capacity of Shakyamuni Buddha and myself. No difference between Dogen or Rinzai, Mohammed, any of these people and myself. Our capacity is one. And this is in Buddhism when we talk about killing the Buddha, killing the ancestor. what we're pointing to is that specialness, the otherness, the separateness, the differentness of that being, whether it's a Buddha or a Bodhisattva or a ancestor, evaporates. And we begin to see that they're just old people who are just like me, who have no different capacity, no qualitative difference between me and them, or a stone, or a tree. And it goes both ways, because when we think we're really special, we realize actually there's no qualitative difference between me and a murderer or a rapist, a genocidal maniac, or a dog, or a pig, or a chicken, or a stone. Our capacities are one. On the precipice of life and death, you're completely at ease. Where will you go after you die? Regardless of where you find yourself or how you arrive, you enjoy a merry and playful existence, or a harmonious samadhi. I ask you again, how do you manifest this realization? Employ every ounce of your energy to embrace this mu. If you hold on without interruption, behold, a single spark and the ancestral candle is lit. I'm very sorry for going on for so long. But this case, this single practice of mu, is the source, is the origin, is the engine within the engine. It's the reaction that fuels the reactor of Zen practice. It's a very simple thing. This separation that we uphold between subject and object, inside and outside, self and other. As we practice, watch, feel, explore. Experiment with your breath, experiment as you sit and as you chant and as you eat. Watch as you face the activity that you're engaged in. Experience dissolution into it. Witness being born again on the other side, having fully dissolved, completely emptied, become one with the activity. To even say becoming one with the activity still upholds two. It's not good enough. All right, I'll let Wu Men's verse carry us out then. Wu Men says, a dog, Buddha nature, the pronouncement, perfect and final. Before you say it has or has not, you are dead where you stand. Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.